which takes us to the end. The main idea tonight is that we can fearlessly build God's church because it will last forever, and Jesus is forever on the throne. What is your biggest fear? First, okay, before you answer, I'm going to go out on a limb and say all of us, if we thought very long about it, would say our biggest fear is that somebody we love doesn't make it to the Lord. That being the case, we'll assume that, and let's say our biggest fear that really doesn't matter that much.
Like health?
No.
Health issues.
That matters. Like some people are afraid of bugs.
Okay.
Goofy things.
So,
Yes, your biggest fear that doesn't matter that much. It matters to you, but other people look at it and they're like,
Heights.
okay, afraid of height.
Going to cities.
Okay.
Mice in the house.
Mouse.
glass on the floor.
Yeah.
Bats.
Bad.
I wonder why. I'm sorry.
Okay.
What was it?
I
Snakes.
don't particularly like snakes. I'm not really afraid of them as long as I can see them first.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or adult lawnmower. When I went to take the money out to him, he's like, I just seen a snake. You guys have a lot of them out here? And then told his brother or something to stay away from the backyard because there was a snake.
We went 3 years ago to Miami, and we were down in the Everglades, and there's people that make their living hunting for non-native, like big boa constrictors and pythons, because they're invasive species. And the guy showed me a picture. They're like 20 feet long. And they're just out through the, like, in the weeds and stuff. They're a swamp.
People brought them in too.
Yeah.
People brought them all into Florida.
Yep. Anybody else? A fear?
Hey, my greatest fear is dying away from home.
Okay. Okay.
Tim's is spiders.
Spiders.
Yeah, he's worse than a kid.
What's yours?
Mine? Well, again, it's somewhat like Don's. I'm not sure it's a fear. It's slugs. I hate them.
Oh, me too.
Mm-hmm.
A profound dislike.
Yeah, I hate them.
Pastor,
June bugs.
Lisa said my driving.
Okay.
Fruits and vegetables. Sorry, I did that.
Like turnips, though. You're right, Kathy. You
Y'all
like turnips.
There's the lesson writer here says there's a reason why God says in his word hundreds of times, do not fear, or fear not. Fear is real and debilitating. The enemy will use fear any chance he gets to stop us from doing what God has called us to do for his kingdom. Our fears around building the church are possibly subtle and insidious. They're not obvious, nameable fears like fear of sharks or fear of heights or fear of being trapped in an elevator with an accordionist. Rather, they play on our sense of identity and our insecurities. God's people knew all about this kind of fear as they faced the rebuilding of the temple in a hostile socio-political environment. As we watch the video tonight, there's 3 questions to think about. Why is God going to shake everything? Why would Zerubbabel have been tempted to stop the rebuilding of the temple and lay low? And what gives him courage and energy to press on? So as you watch, you can be thinking about the answers to those questions. When I was at Warsaw, the principal at the elementary went to our church, went to the Nazarene church, was the organist, and he was kind of a big guy. And one time there was a mouse in the school office, and he was up on top of his desk, standing up there while the secretary took care of it.
You'd be up there with
We had a little, before we lived with Mom, a little snake crawled under the door, and she calls Tim, and Tim says, well, call Dylan and have him get it out. I'm like, really?
There aren't dangerous things around here, really.
No. And in Tennessee, they like the garden snakes and stuff because it keeps the poisonous ones away.
One of our sons had one for a while.
Called his people to an incredible purpose, to rebuild the temple. And the people have been pretty down about it, with mixed up priorities, struggles with comparison and pride. Haggai's already given them 3 messages from God. And now it's time for the last, in chapter 2, verse 20 to 23. Let's be honest, there's probably hundreds of reasons why we don't devote ourselves to building God's church. But one of the things that stops us the most is this: fear. See, on Sunday, it's easy to be a Christian. We're together, we're strong. But when we're out there on a Monday, and we're the only one, and the world around us seems so strong, and the pressure seems so great, that it's often hard, and often we're afraid. You just have to look at the world and it can seem so powerful, it's successful, it's popular, it prospers. Then you look at the church you're part of, or your own faith, and you see how weak and unimportant it often looks. How can you devote yourself to building God's church when the world looks so strong and the church looks so weak? Well, I want to show you 2 reasons God gives in this last message from Haggai for why you don't need to fear. Here's the first. God says that one day he's going to shake everything. It's a picture of his final judgment. When God shakes things, it uncovers whether they're strong or not. Like with an earthquake, any buildings that have solid foundations will remain standing, whilst weaker buildings crumble. It's like the parable of the wise and foolish builders in Matthew 7. The house that was built on the sand looks exactly the same on the outside as the house built on the rock, but when the shaking comes, one stands and one falls. Haggai tells us the kind of things that will be shaken: authorities, powers, armies. They're the kind of things that appear strong now, but underneath, they're nothing. God says it again and again to hammer it home. He is stronger than everything in the world. He's more powerful than armies, than rulers, than even whole kingdoms. He just clicks his fingers and they're destroyed. How? Because he's the Lord Almighty, the God of armies, the Lord of hosts. God's people are terrified. They're small in number. They have little influence. They live in a tiny country compared to the Persian Empire, who control the world. They feel very small and insignificant. And it's likely they thought, we don't want to do anything to upset those stronger than us. But what does God say? They're not as strong as they look. You really don't need to fear. I'm stronger. I'm stronger than all those countries that surround you and taunt you. And don't forget, if you're my holy people, then I'm at your side. The God of armies is with you. We get little reminders of this throughout history. Nations and people who think they are so powerful and yet disappear in the blink of an eye. The Babylonians, the Persians, the Mongols, the Romans, all massively powerful, but where are they today? The world may think it is bigger and better than God and his people, but oh how wrong they are. At his final judgment, who will stand? The powers that trusted in themselves? No. The armies that fought for their own glory? No. The kings and queens who ruled for their fame? No. Only those who have a firm foundation will stand, those whose house is built on the rock, the Christian who's been made holy by Jesus and brought into his kingdom. So when you look at your church or your faith and it seems so weak in comparison to the world around you, you don't have to fear. You can keep on building God's church fearlessly because you've got the God of armies at your side. And here's the second thing, the second reason you don't have to fear. And we're going to have to work a little bit of this one. Are you ready? Zerubbabel is one of the names that comes up a lot in Haggai. In chapter 1, we're told that he's the son of Shealtiel. That's important because Shealtiel is a descendant of King David, which means Zerubbabel is too. In fact, Zerubbabel's grandfather, Jeconiah, was king of Judah when the Babylonians came and captured God's people. So Zerubbabel really was heir to the throne. But we're told he's only governor of Judah, not the king. God's people are still under the rule of the Persians. And so they have a Persian king, Darius. So God makes this promise to Zerubbabel in verse 23 that he'll be made like God's signet ring, chosen by God. Now, a signet ring is owned by a king. Only kings have them. It's like a little ring with a stamp on it to act as their signature and symbolise their authority. But we've got a problem. We know from history that Zerubbabel never became king, let alone the king chosen by God with all his authority. So, what's this promise about? Well, just like with King David, God promised that sometime in the future, one of his descendants would be king. Greater than all previous kings, a king over all the world, and not just king for a few years, but king forever. That promise wasn't to David himself, but to his family line, someone in the generations to come who would fit that description. The same is true here. God's promise isn't to Zerubbabel as an individual, but as a descendant of King David. A descendant who would one day be the great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather of the most awesome, most powerful, mighty king in the universe. Zerubbabel didn't fit the description, but Jesus did. King Jesus is the one who wears God's signet ring on his finger. He's the one who has the divine power of God in him. He's the one with the authority of the creator of the universe. He's the one who will one day smash all his enemies who stand in his way. Jesus is the king. Now just imagine for a moment being Zerubbabel, the governor of Judah.
I guess we can imagine.
How did the governor feel?
I can only imagine.
Yeah, talk amongst yourselves.
Email address, I can only imagine.
It's a movie.
It is.
Yeah. Oh. And good. Hey, I just thought of something I was going to tell you since this is going on. They had a bunch of these chairs at the Masonic Lodge in Rochester. They were selling for $1.
Did you go to the same?
Yeah, some of them.
I didn't know about it too. I don't know, ask Nita. Rosie, if we need it for here.
Yeah, I didn't know if you did or not, but for $1.
Do we need more folding chairs?
Pardon?
Do we need more folding chairs
For what?
for here?
We got a closet full.
We used all, had them all out at Easter, but that was unusual. She said they have them at the Masonic Lodge in Rochester for $1 each. They're selling them this way.
We're hoping to get white tables and white chairs one of these days.
Oh, chairs too? Nice. Oh, that is a good deal.
Yeah. So, figured it was just worth mentioning.
Yeah, thanks.
So we're going to see where the password is now.
I'm close.
Why is the apparatus down?
We got a little bit of stuff, but they had it online, the list, but they didn't have paper copies, like a couple different places I asked. They tried to tell me a place to go, going down this way and turning on this street and turning that way, and by the second direction, my mind's scrambled. So.
I saw it
Yes.
after I got home from that walk, and then I decided not to drive.
VR 459.
VR 5.
But it was fun.
Yeah, I would have gone if I'd have known ahead of time.
VR 5.
I don't know how I find my reminders, but I got a bunch of garage sales marked.
On the 11th is here in town.
Yeah.
Right?
Of May?
Uh-huh. Taylorville ones. Which is this the first year they've had a citywide one, I think.
I don't ever remember one.
They're also having a city cleanup day.
After that, probably. For all people's leftovers. I think we're gonna put some stuff out. I don't have very much. I'm gonna try to get rid of some stuff. He really makes his arms around.
He's very gestural.
All I can get is figure of speed on now.
You look at the Persian Empire, and they are huge. They are mighty. You're the one who's meant to be leading God's people in building the temple. How do you feel? Terrified. King Darius of Persia could crush you in an instant, and so you think, maybe we'll just keep our heads down, let's not bother with the temple. And God says to you, Zerubbabel, you, from your line will come my king. He's going to rule, not just the Persian Empire, but the whole universe, and not just for a few years, but forever. From you, Zerubbabel. So don't you go giving up on me. Wouldn't that give you a bit of courage to do what God had asked of you? Wouldn't it give you the energy to press on and keep going? Think about it. Jesus, right now, is king over all. He has all authority in heaven and on earth. This very moment, Jesus is seated at the right hand of God the Father, wearing his signet ring. He's ruling the world. His kingdom is growing. And nothing or no one can stop him, because the power doesn't lie out there. No, the power lies with King Jesus. But the moment Jesus died, how did he look? Weak, vulnerable, defeated. But what was going on underneath? The earth shook as he conquered once for all the powers of this world. He looked weak, but was bringing about something glorious. The complete and full forgiveness of sins. And death, it had no grip on him. Why should you devote your life to building God's church? Why should you be obsessive in denying yourself and following Jesus? Why should you commit to serving on a team in your local church? Why should you reach out to the lost? Why should you pour your time and energy and money and resources into spreading the good news of Jesus? Why should you make sacrifices in your life so you can build up sisters and brothers in faith, in good deeds, in love? Because Jesus is on the throne. He's building his church. And he's calling you to join him in his purposes. And one day, he will shake the heavens and the earth. He will show you where the true power really lies. And on that day, the only thing left standing will be King Jesus and his kingdom. So what is there to fear?
Okay, I don't know why I did that, but we're back, so it's okay. Why is God going to shake everything?
To see what's strong enough to last.
Okay. Why would Zerubbabel have been tempted to stop the rebuilding of the temple and lay low?
Because the size of the armies.
Because how strong and powerful the bad guys were. What gives him courage and energy to press on? Okay.
Got a promise.
You got a promise. Okay.
And God had chosen him to do the work.
Right.
And he also said only those with a firm foundation.
Okay. Dave, the speaker there, kept talking about the God of armies was at his side. In many translations, that phrase is going to be the Lord of hosts. That's what the God of armies is. The Lord of hosts is the God of armies. Hosts are the armies. Okay. He started off by saying there are probably hundreds of reasons why we don't devote ourselves to building God's church, but fear is probably the biggest reason of all. What would be some specific fears around joining in this sort of work for God in your own community?
They might say no.
Okay. So fear of rejection.
Yeah.
Anything else?
I hate to say it, but ridicule.
Yep.
That we're missing somebody that we're supposed to share with.
That's an interesting thought, and I don't know that I've ever heard it said that way, but it's probably really accurate. For some people, the same sort of people that have trouble making a decision at the restaurant might, and I'm being serious, might have that problem because you get so bound up in not knowing the best one that you can't do any.
I think one of the greatest fears is being fearful of not being adequate for the purpose.
Okay.
Saying that, not praying the right way for them.
Yeah, because we're afraid that we might mess it up for them forever.
Yeah.
Which really, there is no wrong.
I mean, there could be more effective ways of doing it, but I know D.L. Moody once was accosted by some woman at his church or at a church where he was speaking, and she was getting on him because she didn't like the way he was doing his thing, evangelizing, and he said, well, I mean, I like my way of doing it better than your way of not doing it.
Well, I think another fear would be of failure.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So in Haggai, God's people were a comparatively weak minority, that feared the Persian Empire. There were reasons to fear the Persians. There were legitimate reasons to fear them. They were the absolute world superpower in a day when being the world superpower meant you just went around doing whatever you want. The United States could legitimately be called the lone superpower in the world, but the United States doesn't go throwing its weight around militarily. We're not conquering people. All right. They felt, then because of the power of the empire based on military, they felt a lot of cultural and political pressure. And were tempted to just kind of keep their heads down so as not to anger their oppressors. We read the story of Daniel, for example, when they first get there, Daniel and the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they first get there, and their first trial was, were they going to maintain their identity as followers of God, or were they going to assimilate and be like the culture around them? They could have said, well, we don't want to be on the wrong side of history here. And they could have just gone with the others, because I guarantee you, people being what they are, there were plenty of Israelites that did that. That just went along. Our place is gone. Those days are over. We're here now. We might as well get along as best we can. A lot of people today, a lot of Christians today, are in that same temptation to assimilate to the world's way of thinking and the world's way of doing things, and don't want to be on the wrong side of history. As though if someday someone, proves that this is wrong and the culture's right, oh well, we'd look silly then, I guess. No. As a follower of Jesus, we still face these sorts of cultural and political pressures. We may fear offending people. Okay? If you speak for the Lord, it's entirely possible you might offend someone. Again, in our own culture these days, being offended is a hobby. There are plenty of people who collect reasons why they're offended about everything. And one thing that we could take heart in is the ultimate result of that is not that people generally are more polite and nicer to one another and more open to one another. It's that a different set of people start being the aggressors in conversation. If I am busy telling you, you can't say that, that offends me. You can't say that, that offends me. That offends me, that offends me, that offends me. I'm controlling everything. We don't have to play along with that. We as Christians should never be offensive just in our manner. I mean, there are good and bad ways of trying to reach people for the Lord. I mean, going up to a complete stranger and saying, if you don't quit that, you're going to hell. It might be true. And maybe the Lord can work on with that. But I mean, that's the last thing you'll say to that person. They won't listen to anything else. So, I mean, we might be offensive in that way. But the offense of the gospel is you don't just get to do whatever you want to do and it be okay. The offense of the gospel is, no, you really don't get to decide everything about yourself. The offense of the gospel is people are born in sin, not just in bad circumstances. They're born in sin. Without a Savior, they will ultimately be judged found guilty and condemned to hell. They will. That's offensive. I always find it interesting, people that don't believe in hell are deeply offended if they think you think they're going to go there. If it doesn't exist, why do you care what I think?
Yeah, exactly.
But, all right. Through the prophet Haggai, God comforts his people with two promises. The first is that he'll shake everything, which sounds sort of terrifying. Why would that have been a comfort and an encouragement to the people?
Because the Persian Empire would be gone and they would still be standing.
Okay. See, when they looked around, what they could see was the world was ordered against them. The world and its systems had won. And God and his people had clearly lost. That's the way it looked. Now, I hope they didn't forget that the reason they were there was because of their idolatry. They were clearly warned over and over and over again. But the world had won. It was easy to look at the Persian Empire and say, they have just crushed everything. Don't forget, it wasn't the Persian Empire that took Israel out of their place. It was the Babylonians. They were the biggest superpower. What happened to them? The Persians crushed them. So the Babylonians just came in and just swallowed us up, and now these people swallowed them up. So it was easy for them to think, there's no fighting these people. They've won. It is easy for us today to look around and watch the news. I personally would suggest you don't do that so much. Watch the news and say, man, we're losing. The world is just going to hell quickly. They don't even have the handbasket. They're just going to hell. Every day it seems like it gets worse and worse and worse. There's just nothing that can be done. But God says, you know what? Someday we're going to come along and just shake everything up.
That's right.
And you'll find out what really stands.
That's right.
Then you'll see who's on the wrong side of history.
That's right.
The book of Haggai reminds us that the world is peripheral to the church, not the other way around. The world is peripheral to the church. Haggai encourages God's people with the truth that they have the Almighty God on their side, and that the powers they fear aren't as strong as they seem. Does the Persian Empire still exist today?
Yes.
Iran.
But is Iran an empire?
No.
So the Persian Empire doesn't exist. It got beat. It got beat. You know who beat it? Alexander the Great, the Greeks. Does the Greek Empire exist? No. You know who beat them? Rome. Does the Roman Empire exist? Nope.
I'm not smarter than a fifth grader, okay?
The Roman Empire fell to the barbarians, to the Goths and the Visigoths and all those people. Yeah, one empire after another. And all along the way, they start thinking they're going to be the ones. And now, boy, and I know people don't like to hear it. The United States of America, as an empire, is also going to fall. It's going to. The thing that's going to stand is God and God's church. That's what's going to stand. That's not reason for, to me, that's not reason for us not to, as citizens, it's good for us to support our nation and godly things, but a great portion of our country is rapidly working against things that God cares about and doing it proudly.
The Ten Commandments. Oh, the Ten Commandments, that's what I was doing at Tewell Terrace today, and I'm like, that's the world just falling apart because of all these that aren't obeyed.
Yeah. Okay, so God's second promise to his people, the first one was that he's going to shake everything, to alleviate their fear, is that Zerubbabel will become king. God's people, though, are still being ruled by the Persian king, Darius. Zerubbabel's just a governor. He really never does become king. But Zerubbabel is a descendant of David and a rightful heir to the throne. Like David, he's a link in the chain that leads from David all the way to Jesus. Jesus is going to be, well, as of Haggai's writing, Jesus is going to be king forever. Now he already is. He is going to be the king of kings. Jesus rules his own dominion. He created everything, so it makes sense that he would be in charge of it all. Anything that happens that isn't pleasing to the Lord now is just for a time. There will come a time when Jesus says, no more. We try. I mean, you've had kids. They want to do something. No, I'll do it my way. Like, okay, go ahead. And then after they mess it all up, you're like, okay, we tried it your way. Now let me show you how it's done. Jesus is going to come back and do that one of these days. We shared communion today. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. He's going to. And you may or may not see it with the eyes you got right now, but he is going to come. Jesus, the life of Jesus and the work of Jesus should help us to understand that so much of our fears are really a problem of perspective. They're a problem of perspective. In my neighborhood, it's the season that I have to be careful not to take a less than charitable attitude towards some of my neighbors. As we pull in to the neighborhood off of 29, there are geese that nest right there. And those geese think that they can just walk back and forth on the road and we're all going to slow down for them. And my problem is too many of my neighbors participate in that nonsense. And they let the goose decide how fast traffic should move. You know, like there's times when you're hardly able to get your back end off 29 with cars going back and forth because someone is waiting. And the other day, I'm sitting there watching this person resisting the urge to, I thought about it. I thought, I'm just going to ease up there and just bump their bumper and get them to go. I didn't.
All you gotta do is honk your horn.
But they're waiting, and this goose is taking its time walking, but its head is low in the threatening posture. It's like hissing at this car as it goes by. Do you realize the nonsense of that? That goose is the world that is just walking around hissing at God, and God's just being patient, but he's not always going to be. It appears that the goose is in control. The perspective is wrong. I just want to go up and peck on the window of that person and say, look, they're not penguins. They can fly. If you just keep going, they'll get out of the way. But that's my deal I got to work on.
We'll pray for you.
You pray for me, but don't waste it on that. Pray for something real. Because I'm actually right in that. Okay, anyway, the perspective is what brings fear. The perspective is what brings wrong thinking. The skewed perspective is what is the problem. We think that the world is so powerful, that the world is just getting more and more power and more authority. You know, we think things are just going downhill more and more and more, that Satan is gaining ground, that he's just getting more and more powerful and more powerful and more powerful. I just got to tell you, he's never been any more powerful than he is. In fact, he's less powerful than he used to be, because there was one point at which Jesus hadn't risen from the dead. He could have been seen to be more powerful then. But really, the real story is that the world looks really strong, but is actually really weak. Looks like it's going to last forever, but it's very ephemeral. It's passing. The church might look weak, but the church is strong, because Jesus said, the gates of hell aren't going to prevail against it. It's going to last. It doesn't mean every building that calls itself a church will always be there. There are buildings and congregations that come and go, but the church is going to be forever. And it is a picture of Jesus himself, because Jesus on the cross looked weak. He came as a lamb. He looked weak. He defeated by weakness. He defeated by submission. He defeated by obedience. He didn't come in crack heads. He looks weak, but he's really strong. God's promise to Zerubbabel and the glimpse of future victory gives him faith and energy to keep building joyfully, confidently, determinedly, and with great strength. Right now, Jesus is on the throne. He's not going to be on the throne someday. He's on the throne right now. He's not going to someday have his way. He has his way right now. We don't understand why he is patient and lets things go. But when we don't understand that, let's remember that those that we care about, those that we love, those that we're praying for that aren't yet in the kingdom, maybe part of his patience in letting some of this nonsense go on is because he's waiting for people like the one you care about to have one more chance. I mean, if Jesus wasn't patient, where would any of us be? So he's on the throne. His kingdom is growing. It's easy to, this summer here in July, we'll have district assembly. And the district superintendent will give a report, and he'll show statistics for the district. And some of those look like, boy, the church is really going the wrong way. I get that. I understand that. And I don't like that either when those numbers look like that. Our numbers are going to look good. Not because of me, because the Lord's working. But in some places, you see it goes that way. But worldwide, the church is growing. The church is growing. And God, he's got a plan. He's got this. He's got this thing. So if he's on the throne, if his kingdom's growing, if nothing and no one can stop it, why would we be stopped? We just have to face that fear. Now, this isn't in the lesson, and I give this as a thought piece for you. Sometimes it might be helpful to you to face a fear, one of those fears that we mentioned before, not the fear that our loved ones are not going to make it, but the fears that aren't that big a deal, whether it's a slug or a bug or whatever. Maybe it would be helpful to us to face that fear and learn to get over it a little bit, to deal with it a little bit, so that other fears that hold us back for real kingdom building stuff, maybe we can get a hold of those too.
Should we bring Slug over to your house?
Yeah, see the thing in a shoe, yeah. I went out, I had my garden shoes, and I went out one time and slipped my foot in there.
Take off running.
He rolled onto the ground, just rolled.
Yeah.
Picked up his
See,
shoe.
it's really inaccurate to say I'm afraid of them, because I'm not. They're just repulsive. They are an absolute. There were no slugs in the Garden of Eden. They are a part of the fall.
And they're slimy too.
Yes, terrible.
A little bit of salt will take care of it.
No,
That makes them
that's a
worse.
bad idea. I can tell you a
It
story
looks
about
like
that
It
too.
does.
That makes me rich. No, but I mean, sometimes we have to face that, and kind of get a grip on ourselves sometimes. So,
I think what, when you think about the power of God, Israel still exists.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at all those people, you just talk about their nations that tried to conquer the world are gone. Israel still exists. All of its neighbors hate it. And when you talk about fear, my fear right now would be what I'm seeing in our country being anti-Semitic, and I've never seen it like that before. And it's really flipped for some reason. Well, because the media is given a big audience, and it makes a lot of news. But I've never seen us turn, and I've never seen the president turn on Israel like I've seen right now.
yeah.
So,
Well, next week we'll have revival, so we won't be over here. Okay, so be working to bring some people to that. That'd be good. Let's have a word of prayer as we close tonight. Father, thank you for your word to us tonight. We thank you that you are already on the throne, that you are already victorious, that your church is going to not only survive, but it's going to thrive and it's going to grow. Help us to keep our eyes on you, that we might have a better perspective, that the longer we look at the trouble in the world, the more we see trouble in the world. Help us to focus on you and give us a more optimistic view. I just feel like no one's ever really won to the Lord through pessimism, and I just pray that you would help us to have the optimism of the gospel as we go through our world, and people will ask us about the hope they see in us. A lot of people have no hope for the world today. We know what the answer is. Let us hold that and let the hope shine through, that we might be a witness for you. We think again of the ones that we prayed for earlier, and we ask that you would intervene in those situations. I pray that you'd bless each one that's here, Lord. Some of them are going to get up and go to work tomorrow, and I pray that you would watch over them, help them to be a witness for you, help them to remember when they do that that job, that thing they're doing, they do for your glory, and that you would help them to do the best they can there. And some of us here are not going to be going to work tomorrow. We're going to be doing other things, and I pray that you'd watch over them and keep them close to you as well. Don't let any of us ever think that we're alone, because we know we have you and we have each other. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.